Morning, guys. Happy Tuesday. It is such a busy day, and I know that you have been watching this crazy news out of Paris, France, and the burning of the Notre Dame Cathedral, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today as well. But one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is a story that we're working on that is incredibly challenging to report on, and I want you to know what's going on. Sometimes when we're a little late popping up for Coffee Talk Live, or we're a little delayed posting on social media, that's normally because early in the morning we're doing some continuing fact checking from the night before, or trying to put the final pieces together for a story we're working on. And so one of the stories that we're working on for you here at SmartHER News that you will see this week is about the number, the Southwest border apprehension numbers. The amount of illegal border crossers coming across in March was a very high number, historically very high. And you had more than 90,000 people apprehended at the U.S. southern border. It's unique in many ways. And the reason why I think this story deserves such priority, regardless of what else is happening with the news, is that it is so unique in the amount of people coming, the number of families coming, and the number of huge groups, 100 people or more coming, and the impact that's happening on our southern border in America, but also the challenges it's presenting on multiple levels. Just challenges for the government and how we're handling it, but it's also asking some really big questions about America and American identity right now. How do we handle those that are coming in applying for asylum? How are we handling our immigration policy in 2019? How are we going to handle it for the next 100 years? So it's a multi-layered story, and there's a lot of questions, but the major question we're trying to answer is, if 90,000 plus people were apprehended at the U.S. southern border over the last several weeks, what happened to them? Where are they? Where did they go? And it sounds like a very simple question, but the answer is complicated. So I've done a series of different reporting on this. I've reached out to Customs and Border Protection, Department of Homeland Security. As I'm getting more information, it's getting more complicated. It's getting a little bit frustrating. Not on anyone else, just trying to piece together what's going on. So I just wanted you to know that that's something that we're working on. And although it may not come up in a daily news cycle for you, I think it's a really critical question, especially because the trend continues to go up. It's not going down. So if we're looking at 2019 and already in the fourth month of this year, I think it's one of the most important stories we're going to continue to see throughout the year. So that's why I'm focused on it. So I just wanted you to know that's something that we're working on. In the meantime, let's talk a little bit about what happened in Paris yesterday, because I don't know about you, but my heart hurt. When you say, my son and daughter actually say that sometimes. They say, my heart hurts, Mom. And I really, you can really understand that feeling. It was so hurtful to watch this magnificent cathedral that feels like it belongs to the world burn in Paris yesterday. What you should know as of Tuesday morning is that we still don't know the cause. It's still determined at this time an accident, but we have very little information about it. And we're still getting more information about what is the state of the current structure and what does that mean for reconstruction. A couple things I think are really crucial to point out is the timing and also the history of the cathedral. So the timing of this in Paris is really crucial because the president of France yesterday was going to be delivering a speech that was going to be addressing these at times, not always, but at times violent protests that have been happening in Paris and in France dating back to November. And it has caused a lot of civil strife. And at times, again, it's been violent between police and the protesters, and there's been some defacing of monuments, and it's been a really challenging time in France. And I think that that's important to mention in the context of watching this amazingly important French structure burn. So the president was going to make this address on Monday night, and then this fire breaks out. So if I can quickly sum up the protests are challenging those in power. The protests have been political protests challenging different policies that have come forward, but also just the questions of the dynamics, like we see in America, the dynamics between rich and poor, between those that are privileged and those that are not. So they're deep. It's not just surface level protests about one issue or another. And so that's something that France is really dealing with. At the same time, this is a holy week, especially for Catholics. I mean, I shouldn't say especially for Catholics, but for Christians as well. Easter week. And so there's an exorbitant amount of people that are visiting different cathedrals or places of worship. Something that stuck out to me is a former New York City firefighter said that in any other cases, if structures like Notre Dame were not houses of worship, they would be condemned. And the reason why they would be condemned, and this he was saying blanket statement just overall, if you're looking at these very, very old structures, including in some in the States, is because of the security, because of the amount of wood, for example, used to build some of these buildings, or the type of fire code that's allowed. These are not modern structures, and I thought that was interesting to think about because I've never really thought about, especially these older structures in Europe, in that way. So the timing of this really matters. Not only a Holy Week, but also the timing of it for France, and a lot of the feeling I think that we all felt watching it, really kind of beyond words, because of the history of this place. One thing that made me feel a little bit lighter about the news that I wanted to share with you is that, when you look back at the history of Notre Dame and the different layers of it being built and how it was put together, and yes, we're never going to be able to repeat what was there, but historically the building is very much a collage of different hands that have touched it at different times with different architectural flair and flavor. And so in that way, despite this destruction, that tradition will continue. It will look different, but it will continue. And the structure will survive in one form or another. So this might not be the end. It's the next chapter of what's already been a structure that has seen many hands and many different phases throughout history. So just keep that in mind today. In the meantime, just one other piece of news that I think is important in America, but also worldwide, is the news about the measles outbreak. As we talked about last week, the CDC determines an outbreak anything more than 3 or more cases. That doesn't sound that scary. What's important to note is that last week we had more than 90 cases reported in America. That is the highest number of cases we've seen in a long time. We're now more than 500 cases. Some of you have said to me, well, is this really that big of a deal? No one has died. And it is true, no one has died from measles in the United States so far due to this outbreak. Statistically, deaths for measles are 1 or 2 in 1,000. So what I think you should know is we're creeping closer to 1,000. We're not even halfway through the year. We're already at more than 550 cases. So the likelihood that we could see more hospitalizations, or perhaps worse, is growing as we're seeing these numbers go up. Again, the important issue is the trends. It's not just the headline from last week, it's the trends. It's the trend that the measles cases continue to go up. So then the question becomes, well, how do you stop that? What are the different ways we're seeing that? We're seeing, as you know, New York City declare a public health emergency, try to get those vaccinated in specific areas. They call it forced vaccinations if you haven't been vaccinated, although no one is physically forcing you to do anything. I just think you should know that's the trend, but you should also know that that's the trend not only in America, but also worldwide. We're seeing more statistics of measles cases rising all over the world, so it's not necessarily unique to us. And I think that's something that we should all pay attention to, because not just because it's sort of like this interesting headline, but because measles is so highly contagious. And I think that makes it more of a priority. So a couple of those stories to keep in mind. Again, one story you're not going to see on our site today about immigration, but that we're looking into. And also just a little historical context and timing context for Notre Dame. And finally, one of the big stories, which is a health story that could really affect families, not only here in America, but all over the world. Anyhow, guys, if you have any other stories you'd like us to look into this week, please let us know. You could email us info@smarternews.com or always direct message us on social media. Have a great day, guys. I'll talk to you later.